Welcome to Satsang, this evening, morning, wherever you happen to be. And the usual format that I do is beginning with a little guided meditation, and then I'll give a little talk, share some insights and thoughts, and then we'll open it up for dialogue and discussion. And when nothing is happening, we'll naturally lapse into silence, which is also, it's not an absence, it's actually a wonderful opportunity to enjoy the silence and just kind of spontaneous meditation. Okay, so let's begin with a little guided meditation, shall we? And what I will suggest is that you let go of your usual technique for the sake of this particular gathering. And just let me guide you. So just begin by letting go of your usual preoccupations, your thoughts and plans and whatever else the mind is doing, and just let your awareness drop into your sensate experience. And just allow everything to be as it is. This is not easy necessarily. We spend so much of our time trying to manipulate or change our experience, trying to get the world to be different from the way it is. So this is actually a radical invitation. Just be open and present, not distracted, not preoccupied, and at the same time, not manipulating experience. Let everything be as it is. Not in past, not in future. In the fullness of the present moment as much as you can. No efforting, no trying, just being. As you let everything be, the mind doesn't have to get involved. You don't have to interpret or judge. Just letting it be in its fullness, in its richness, in its mystery. People often report feeling bored or restless in their lives, or empty, as if something's missing, something's lacking. And it's because we don't let being in, we don't let life in. We keep it at a distance. We fill the space with interpretation and story and memory. So, what is it like just to let being in, let ourselves be nourished, filled with being, our true nature, our essence? There may come a moment when the sense of a separate someone experiencing being drops away, and there's only being. Okay, well, thank you again, everyone, for joining, and welcome once again to the satsang. So the topic is just be who you are, but of course that's always the topic, so nothing new about that in one form or another. So I thought I would read a little, this is a little sentence paragraph that I wrote for a satsang flyer, and I think it'll be a theme that we can explore together. So the reality is you're no one pretending to be someone, huh? You're a limitless being playing the part of a particular person, huh? Which is fine as far as it goes. But the problem is you're so lost in the role you've been called upon to play and in the world that springs up around this role, around this part. You could say the screenplay, around this illusory someone that you've forgotten who you really are. Huh? So that's kind of where we're at, right? And so the point of satsang is to remember, to come together, to remember who we are, to point to who we are, and to remind us of what we're not. Huh? So the conventional view, of course, which is trumpeted and reinforced everywhere we look, is that we're a separate someone surrounded by other separate someones. We're solid, we're substantial, we have a history and a future. We have a place in space and time. And we have a name that identifies this separate someone. We have certain characteristics which we've inherited or been conditioned to believe are who we are. And we live in a world of separate objects, right, out there that we need to manipulate and control in order to feel safe, in order to get approval, in order to get love, in order to protect ourselves, in order to survive. There's scarcity. There's only so much out there. There's only so much in here. All of this is the view, right? That we labor under, huh? And that is imposed upon us from a very early age, right? And it's very seductive. It's very believable. It's a comprehensive, thoroughgoing view of reality, which pervades everything we do, right? And we may stray away from that from time to time. We may read spiritual books which give us a sense that that's not all that is true. We may play around with or experiment with other more spiritual, more non-dual points of view, right? And we may even hang out there for a little while, which may be reassuring or inspiring, and remind us that what we think to be true may not really be as true as we think it is. But it has a way of creeping back in again, huh? Over and over and over, until we finally and completely are able to shift into a whole new way of seeing and being, right? So in this conventional view that we're, thoroughly immersed in, we take our thoughts and our feelings and our interpretations of reality to be who we are. We create this whole world of meaning, right, based on the way we see and feel things, based on the emotions that we have, which are usually based on the past, on past conditioning, based on the ideas we have, which are, which we've accumulated over the years about how other people are, about how we are, about how the world is. We create a whole world of meaning based on our conditioning, on hearsay, basically, on stuff we've picked up along the way, we've read in books, we've been told by our parents or our peers, we've read in magazines, we've watched on TV, whatever. So we accumulate this whole realm, that we create and reinforce and invest with our energy. That's our life. That's what we take to be who we are. And if anyone criticizes that or challenges that, we get upset. We feel threatened. We defend. We protect, right? Or we promote and put forward and vigorously, announce who we are and push it into the world. Or we withdraw from the world because we're afraid. Whatever it is, it's all based on a fiction, on a construct, on a story, right? And we're thoroughly immersed in that story. We're, as Byron Katie likes to say, we're velcroed to the story. Huh? We don't have any space between ourselves, whoever that might be, and the story. Consciousness has fallen, being has fallen for the screenplay, has fallen for the illusion. It's totally lost in the part that it was called upon to play. We believe the story, we believe the screenplay, we believe the role. That's who I really am, isn't it? Right? And we live in a world full of other people who support us in that view, in that ersatz reality, right? And so at a certain point, we may read a spiritual book or go to a satsang or talk to a friend, watch something on YouTube, and we get a little sense that there might be something else. A little crack begins to appear in this facade, but we may not know how to proceed, and we may read some more books and go to more satsangs. We may get a little glimmer of something more, but still, even after years and years of reading and seeking and listening and going to retreats, we still haven't made the shift. We still haven't shifted out. One thing we may have, which is, I think, a big deal, actually, is we may have a little more space around it. There may be a little more sense of not being completely identified with the contents of awareness, the story, the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs, the past, the future. There may be a little bit of space around it. We may have a little bit of sense that, wait, that may not be who we are, who I am. Huh? But we don't know yet who we are, but maybe there's the beginning, the glimmers of a sense that this is not who I am, which is a major step, a kind of mini awakening out of the illusion, just a little bit of wiggle room, right? A little bit of space. So then the awakening, which we all are aspiring, I imagine, to experience, is simply a shift. I say simply, although not necessarily easily, simply a shift out of this whole way of being. And so it's actually a tectonic shift. It's actually an earthquake. It's a massive, even though when it happens, in the moment, it just may seem like the slightest little opening, the slightest little shift. But then when it starts to have its impact, it's like the world has turned upside down and inside out. Because what you realize is that you are not the contents, you are the context, right? You're not the objects, you are the subject, huh? You're not the role you have been called upon to play. You are consciousness itself, which is playing that role, being itself, which is expressing itself through you. Right? So that's the shift, the fundamental tectonic shift in the locus of your identity, right? Which is what spiritual awakening is. And it may happen gradually, little by little. You start seeing it, and then suddenly everything kind of falls into place. Or it may be sudden, all at once, which can again be quite sudden, striking, powerful in the moment. But however it happens, it's that realization, that part, that role, Julie or Keith or Teresa, that I've invested so much time and energy into furthering and reinforcing and living as. Suddenly we realize that that's not it. That's not who we are. And maybe we don't even know exactly what we are. Still a mystery. And may it forever remain a sacred mystery, huh? But we fall into that. We fall into being itself, huh? So the first step usually is to recognize that's not what I am. Right? The story, the thoughts, the beliefs, etc. That's not who I am. I don't know who I am yet, but I know that's not who I am. Jean Klein used to say, in order to know what you are, you first have to become familiar with what you are not. Body, speech, body, speech and mind, as they say in the Buddhist tradition. Your body, your thoughts, feelings. This is not who I am. And that's huge, right? Because that's what you've taken yourself to be. So the first step is to recognize what you're not. The next step is to fall into who you are. Just be who you are, as Ramana says. Sounds easy, but first you have to find it. First you have to awaken to it, discover it. I mean, the truth is, you always are who you are. In reality, you've never for a moment not been playing a particular role. And that role is beautiful. The role we play is part of the dance, is part of the play of consciousness. And we're not saying there's anything wrong with the role. It's just we've taken it to be who we are. That's all. It's a case of mistaken identity. Right? And as they say, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Before enlightenment, go to bed, get up, go to work, have your relationships. After enlightenment, go to bed, wake up, go to work, engage in your relationships. But something fundamental has changed, has shifted. Nothing wrong with being a separate someone in this particular body, moving about and loving who you love and, watching Netflix and going to work and, hanging out with your family, whatever it might be. But you don't believe fundamentally that that's who you are. Your view of reality, your experience of reality has completely changed. And now everything you do, everything you experience, every relationship is permeated with this new understanding. You can't go back to the old way of being, the old way of seeing. Not possible. Maybe to some degree, but not completely. You can't get lost anymore, at least not forever, not for an extended period of time. Now, once you wake up, the old view does keep reasserting itself. Old habits keep creeping in, but not for long, because the new way of experiencing reality keeps intruding, keeps cutting it off at its root, keeps pulling the rug out from underneath the illusion, from underneath the story, right? And of course, ultimately, in the full circle, in the full non-dual appreciation, understanding, realizing that is what you're not, the full circle is that's what you are too. Body, speech, and mind, thoughts, feelings, memories, beliefs. These are an expression of being, which is what you are, as well, see, as well, just as everything is an expression, see, but not uniquely, not particularly, not in the narrow, fixated way that you've come to believe it, you see. You know, in the Buddhist tradition, sometimes the cause of suffering is sometimes said to be desire, you know. Sometimes it's said to be attachment, right? Attachment and aversion. But really, in the more advanced Buddhist texts, the real cause of suffering is fixation, fixation of attention, belief, story, you know. So the fixation on this particular someone, the narrowing of attention, narrowing of awareness, and fixating on this. And in the narrowing of awareness, there's a fixation on subject and object. I am the subject surrounded by objects, right? The dualistic view, subject in here, objects out there. You know, got to watch out, got to pay attention, got to be careful, got to ward off, got to protect, got to go after, got to get, right? So that fixation of attention, the narrowing of attention, which is based on the belief of a someone in here and things out there, on the dualistic view, that narrowing of attention keeps us caught in suffering, in limitation, right? In unfreedom. So the awakening shifts us out of duality, out of fixation, into non-duality, which is global awareness, the fullness of being, right? The one without a second. Everything is fully embraced in the fullness of who we are, including thoughts, feelings, right? So again, it's the Buddhist saying, you know, in the beginning, mountains were mountains, rivers were rivers. Then when you wake up, mountains are no longer mountains, rivers are no longer rivers. But then the full circle is mountains are mountains again, rivers are rivers. You know? Thoughts are thoughts, feelings are feelings. You know, Keith or Teresa or Julie, or Keith and Teresa and Julie. And yet, not really. Both being and this individual someone. Both, right? Nothing left out. The full non-dual experience, huh? So I'm going to read you a little, I probably even recited, a passage from this beautiful poem, which I highly recommend, from the Mahamudra tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, called Tilopa's Song to Naropa. It was a beautiful translation by Lex Hickson, which floating around on the internet, you can find it quite readily. And it goes like this. As space is always freshly appearing, but never filled. So as space is always freshly appearing, but never filled, so the mind is without limits and ever aware. So the mind is likened, awareness is likened to space. Never filled. See, space is never filled, right? You couldn't possibly fill space. Space is always, there's always room in space. That's the nature of space. Yeah. In the same way, awareness is limitless and always aware, right? Gazing with sheer awareness into sheer awareness. Gazing with sheer awareness into sheer awareness. Habitual abstract structures melt into the fruitful springtime of awakening. So that's a beautiful expression of the non-dual experience. Gazing with sheer awareness into sheer awareness. That which is looking, that which is looked at are nothing but awareness. You're gazing at yourself. Being is gazing at being. Being is experiencing being, moment after moment. Once that's realized, it's hard to forget, right? And again, you may go in and out for years, perhaps, of the old view. But once you've seen this, you're lured back, you're drawn back again and again because of how deeply, deeply fulfilling this knowing is. It's the ultimate medicine, as Nisargadatta put it, the pearl without price, the wish-fulfilling jewel. You know? Presence, non-dual presence, the one without a second, huh? Experiencing itself, awakened awareness. So this is what we're drawn to know, to experience. This is the ultimate fulfillment of the search, and it's the ultimate freedom, the ultimate end of suffering. Gazing with sheer awareness into sheer awareness. And out of this gazing, this knowing, this deep, deep knowing of who we really are, arise all the beautiful awakened qualities like gratitude, love, peace, compassion, joy, as a natural expression of this deepest truth. No need to cultivate love, you are love. No need to cultivate gratitude, you are gratitude. And being is experienced as who you really are. Gratitude is the primary emotion. Nothing is left out. Everything is complete, perfect as it is. And again, this is our natural state, our natural condition. The real question is not how do we wake up, but how do we keep unawakening ourselves? How do we stay lost in the illusion of being a separate someone? So all desire is ultimately the desire for this. We think we want a new car, a new TV, a new relationship, a better job, but this is what we really want. So let's open it up for questions as you feel inclined. There's just a relatively small group here, so we'll have plenty of time to share and ask if you feel so inclined. Yes, Julie. Hey, Julie, good to see you.
Yes, good to see you, Stephanie. So I'd like to pick up on where you just left off. How is it that we keep getting lost again and again and again? And in my personal observation, it's thinking. Um, it's like the Velcro is thinking. It just keeps pulling me back up into these uh, loops, and then another day is gone, lost in
Or
the.
it's really believing the thinking,
Mm,
right? Thinking
yeah.
itself is not a problem necessarily. It's because we get lost in it. We believe it.
Yeah.
It sucks into the world that thinking creates, huh?
Mhm. And it's a slippery slope because if I have the thought I need to go buy groceries, I do need to go buy groceries. And so that's, and then, then other thoughts kind of piggyback on. And then there's, as you say, it's definitely fixation.
That's
I,
right.
I can even see there is the space where I see, usually after the fact, that there was this fixation, and it just feels like almost a compulsion to
It's a
get
compulsion.
involved.
Yeah. Yeah. Fixation, compulsion. Yeah. We believe that we need thought in order to function. And a certain amount of thought, I think, is, but there's a difference between functional thought and ego thought, you could say, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I'm running out of groceries. I'm running out of carrots. I need to go buy carrots. Okay. And then that's it. Write it down. I keep a to-do list. I write it down. Then I don't have to think about it anymore, right? Oh, the to-do list says go buy carrots. Okay, I'm going to go buy carrots. It's just like that. That's all. But then all the other stuff that goes with it, that's where it gets very complicated and kind of gnarly and, layer upon layer upon layer of story about the carrots. And usually there's a deeper story about, that underlies that fixation on thinking. It usually has something to do with not being safe, not
Mhm.
feeling safe, or not feeling loved, or not believing that you can't survive, or whatever it is that drives that fixation on thinking. Um,
Yeah.
and one of the things I've been giving thought to, I'm going to give a satsang on this in January. I took a course, an online actually summit on collective trauma, and trauma is pervasive in our world. We don't realize how pervasive it is because it's so pervasive. You know, our fathers came back from the war, World War II, traumatized. Our brothers came back from Vietnam, traumatized. People throughout the world are constantly being traumatized by war and violence and rape, and and that's in the field. It gets passed down from generation to generation. One of the things I learned in this summit was that you can actually inherit trauma from previous generations of your family through the epigenetics, not the genes, but the epigenetics. That's the latest research. So, we inherit trauma, right? And trauma, I'm thinking more and more, is actually what causes fixation. Because in trauma, your trust in the universe, in reality, is challenged, is undermined. you no longer trust. And since you don't trust, you feel like you have to be on guard. You have to be vigilant. You have to fixate, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, we've all been traumatized to a greater or lesser degree. So we have to fixate, you got to lock in, got to be vigilant, got to watch out. And this is encouraged in our world by the politics and by the global situation. We're going to be inundated with global warming. We're going to be attacked by terrorists. Constantly reinforced.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is helpful to create a life where we're not constantly having to fixate, where life is relative.
Is Stephen frozen for folks? Yeah, okay. It looks like his internet might have frozen, so we'll just give him a minute, pop back on.
This moment of non-duality is brought to you by Stephen's internet freezing.
Sorry about that. My internet went down there for a bit. Sometimes, occasionally, it does that. So yeah, there's an underlying story, right? Beneath the attachment to the thoughts, there's some underlying deeper story, which is why I think investigation, inquiry, can be very powerful and very helpful. What's underneath it? It's not just, oh, thoughts, are such a problem. They just draw me away. The thoughts are just thoughts, and we don't have to stop thinking in order to wake up. And once we wake up, thought doesn't stop. It's more like, what's the deeper story, that underlies our fixation on thought. Do you know what I mean, Julie? Does that?
Right. Yes. And so, what were you saying about it's helpful to create a life? That's where we lost you. You were saying
it's helpful to create a life where we can feel relatively safe, and have our needs relatively met, people go to monasteries, and it may be a very austere existence, but in fact, you're surrounded by other people who are in the monastery, and you're fed, reasonably well, and there's a sense of a container that supports you in practicing and inquiring and awakening. But we live in a world, this is just the reality, and you can wake up anywhere. So I'm not suggesting you need this, but we live in, for example, in a society in the United States where there isn't much of a safety net, and if you lose your job, maybe you become homeless. It happens all the time, or if you don't have family to support you, and even here in Spain where I live, family is really important, and everyone is closely connected with their family. Not so much in the United States,
Yeah.
So what do we have to support us? There is a sense, I think, that's kind of pervasive, that life is kind of insecure. I get sick and have to go to the hospital, and my insurance doesn't cover it. Next thing you know, I'm broke. Mm-hmm. So I think that's unfortunate. Not much we can do about that, I think. But I think it does make it a little more difficult just to relax. and trust. So to be aware of that, I think just to notice that.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. But deep down, it's really the belief. It wouldn't matter what was going on in the world, in our life, if we deep down believed that, or knew that I am being, and being is indestructible, and I can't die because I'm limitless and timeless. Then it's not going to be a problem. But how do you realize that? Helps to have some sense of trust. And then many of us, did not have secure attachment, a whole other psychological thing, didn't feel supported by our parents, and safe in our childhood environment. These are all factors I think it's important to recognize. Not to make it or break it factors, but something to consider.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah. I don't know if that completely answers your question. Did you want to say a little more about the particular thoughts that grab you?
I was seeing it as kind of I would describe it as an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, which interestingly, when I was a child, not a child, but early teenager, my father used to stop me and say, you're not responsible to fix everything. So I don't know where it came from.
Good for him. Yeah, good.
But anyway,
I think we come in with certain qualities like that too,
Yeah. So it's a constant current running that I can see.
Right.
And it just is, seeming to become more prominent, maybe because other things have fallen away, and this is what's really the driving.
Right. Yeah. So you're seeing the root story, the core story. Yeah. Do you go on retreat from time to time?
Yes. Yeah. And I live by Francis Lucille.
Oh yeah.
So I go there on weekends.
Yeah, retreat's nice because then you're taken care of. You don't have to do anything,
Yeah, and you don't want to leave.
You don't want to leave, right? Yeah, as Ajay used to say, at the end of a retreat, now the real retreat begins. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. So your particular flavor is I'm responsible for everything. If I don't do it, no one else is going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to inquire into that, is it true? Keep aware of that. Stay aware of it. The key I like to say is keeping it in front of you, keeping it all in front of us, so that all these beliefs and stories are objects of our awareness. They don't disappear inside of us. In a certain way, people talk about the inner life, and the New Age is big on the inner life and psychology. But really, awakening is the end of the inner life. There's no inner life anymore. It's all here. Everything is here. Inner, outer, all the same. And to keep it in front of you means to be aware of it, not suck back into it. So if that's your story, then just as much as you can, keep being aware of that story and how it runs your life.
Okay.
And you're aware of it right in this moment. You're talking about it. Stay aware.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll have the carrots delivered by Amazon.
Yeah, that's great. There you go. All foods delivers, right? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Someone else? Just feel free. We have just a small group here and plenty of time. And you came to satsang for a reason. So I want you to be sure to to do what you came to do, huh? Say or ask what you came to ask.
Forgotten how to raise my hand.
There you are. Hi, Alexandra.
Yes. Where is the raise hand function?
You're here. You forget it.
I don't need it.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Stephen.
Hi.
So what you just said brings into focus this question about attention.
Attention. Uh-huh.
So, you know, there's a capacity to sort of open up the lens of awareness and realize that that's what's here, that that's all that's here.
Right. May I just make a slight correction? It's a pointer, really. I'm not correcting you, but awareness is always open. There are no boundaries to awareness. You don't have to open up anything.
So,
Okay.
well, there's where the question about attention comes.
Okay.
There's as the attention narrows in on specific things in life,
Right. Fixation.
there's a forgetting
That's right.
of awareness.
That's right. That's exactly right. There's a forgetting. Yeah. Because awareness, again, is our natural state. We're born with that. We're born with this 360 global awareness, you know? And then we forget it. You know, trailing of clouds of glory do we come from God who is our home, right? Says Wordsworth. And then we forget, right? So, you know, to keep remembering rather than having to open awareness, just remember the awareness that's always open. More like that, right?
Right. And yet endless amounts of time go by.
Right.
Remembering,
How does
right?
that happen? Right.
And if they're, you know, catching it, it's like, oh, attention is fixated, and noticing that attention is fixated. In that moment, the realization of awareness is complete.
Beautiful. That's terrific. Just keep doing that. Yep. Just keep noticing that it's fixated, and in that moment, allowing that noticing to bring you back to the 360, to the global awareness. If that's how it works for you, then that's terrific. Just keep doing that.
So it's a fixated part of me that then laments how many moments are spent in fixation, right?
That's right. That's right. Who cares how many moments are spent?
Who cares? Something.
Right. There are no moments anywhere. There's only now. Time is is a construct of the mind. There's only now. What's happening now? That's all. Those moments are all part of the story.
Oh, that's a big one.
Right. You tell yourself the story that I've been fixated for so long, and isn't that terrible? And what's wrong with me? And when will I ever learn? Right. Just notice and come back to awareness. That's all. Come back to the timeless. Is that a register? Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's all kinds of reverberations, emotion stuff. So yes.
What's going on? What's coming up?
I don't know what the emotion is, but it feels like tears.
Yeah.
Where it's from.
Tears of like touched tears or
Touch.
sad tears? Touched. Yeah. Beautiful. That's great. It's like, oh, how could I ever forget my beloved? You know? It's always been right here. Oh.
Uh-oh. Oh,
Yep.
home.
Yeah. Home. That's right. Home. Beautiful. Well, you're home right now. Just keep coming home. Great. Thank you, Alexandra. Beautiful. Yeah. And yeah, feel free to ask later if you want. Yeah. Yes. You there? Noriko?
Yes, I was wondering if you could give us guidance on the nature of desire from the space of being. Um, I have noticed that I do have a tendency to sort of try to suppress the desires when I realize desires pop up.
Right.
But
Right.
how, like, is it um, mm, is it a natural course of being in trying to fulfill the desires, or is it something that my ego self is sort of expressing?
Right. Well, the first, again, the first step is just to be aware of desire. You know, I mean, what is desire after all? I don't know. Find out. What is it? You know, in other words, don't immediately suppress it or try to get rid of it, but just become interested. Oh, desire. You know, what is that? Oh, there's a kind of ache in my belly, and there are some thoughts about something that I really think I want. And then there's starting to plan how to fulfill it, and you know, just whatever it is, just be aware of it without judgment, without pushing it away or acting it out. Just to be with it, just be present with it, and just become familiar with it. Make friends with it. Make friends with your desire. You know, and then you know, see what happens. There's nothing inherently right or wrong about desire. Desire is just desire, you know? And I think some desires come from, you could say, the ego, some idea you have of what you should get and do, and, you know, based on some agenda that the ego has put forward about shoulds or shouldn'ts, have tos and musts, and whatever, you know. And then there's just other kinds of desires which are just naturally arising, like the desire for food, the desire for sexual contact, the desire, you know, these are kind of more naturally arising appetites, you could say, that naturally arise. Just be aware of those. You know, just become familiar with it, so that none of them is wrong or right, yeah, in itself. It just is what it is, you know. And the more you become familiar with it and not at odds with it, then what tends to happen is things kind of fall into their natural order, into their natural place. The more you become familiar with it, the more you'll get a sense of which desires are appropriate to act on, which desires probably not, you know, probably not so good to act on. You know, there'll be a natural sense of appropriateness that will likely arise, you know, in that space of awareness, right, of presence. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah.
I mean, without desire, we wouldn't function in the world. As human beings, desire is what keeps us going, keeps us moving. Certainly one of the things. I mean, there are deeper things like, you know, compassion and, you know, loving kindness and all the qualities that move us to take action in the world. But that desire is also, you know, if we didn't have desire, we wouldn't go out to the store and shop and make food. If we didn't have desire, we wouldn't find a mate or friends. You know, wouldn't have children. You know, so desire moves us through life in some way. So nothing wrong with desire.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, it's very natural. Desire is very natural to being a human being. You know.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Noriko. Yeah.
Teresa, you had raised
Yes,
your head.
Teresa? Yeah.
Hi, Stephen. Hi,
Hi.
everyone.
Yeah.
It's really great to be with you, everyone. This satsang it's bringing up a lot. Um, it's bringing up how very, very painful it is to be identified as a separate person. And it's, this is good. This is good. There's so much, I hardly know where to begin, but when I woke up this morning, I woke up from a nightmare involving my dog, who had a long, tragic death, and there was a lot of terror. And I brought awareness into the sensation in my chest where the terror was for a while, and then satsang started, and you led us in meditation. And it felt like beforehand I had been directing awareness, and then you started to lead us, and it just felt like I wasn't doing it anymore. Like presence being just took over, and how wonderful, how wonderful. And it's just like, how does this, here we are on the computer, you're in Spain, I guess you're in Spain now. And I'm in Sebastopol, crazy Sebastopol. And, how does this transmission how does this occur? I guess it's a mystery, but just, being with your presence over the internet like this, it's wild.
Well, it's being with your own presence.
It's just really hard for me.
I'm just inviting all of us to
Yes.
to join me in presence, which doesn't belong to anyone. Is our
Yes. It's just somehow being with awakened presence, which I'm guessing you very much have. I've just had a really hard time on my own with very little support. And it's just so damn painful when I know better, I just, you talked about trauma and getting over another series of trauma, the fires just recently, evacuations, power outages, and had my kid out last year, and a sister suddenly dying, and just feels like so much that and so much else trauma. It makes me wonder if I need to deal with the trauma first before even being concerned about spiritual awakening.
Dealing with trauma is a good thing if you can. Yeah. Helps, definitely helps.
Or both simultaneously.
I don't think you'll ever stop.
I can't stop.
Get off the path.
No, couldn't go back. Even if I feel stuck, I couldn't go back. It feels like if I.
Yeah, you won't stop that. But to add a little trauma, work if you can, if you have resources that allow you to work with the trauma a little bit.
Do some people just need a teacher?
I think we all need teachers. I had the good fortune of having some wonderful teachers and couldn't have done whatever has happened, or had the awakening or whatever, that without a teacher. Teachers were crucial for me. So
right.
I can't say they're essential, but I can certainly say that they're really helpful on the path. And even if you want to work on trauma, I do EMDR, and I would imagine that there are places where you can do EMDR for not too much money, counseling centers, places like that. You know, I would recommend it, highly recommend it. You know, doing some trauma work. Yeah, some psychotherapy, EMDR. Yeah.
Right, right. Yes.
Have you tried that?
I did, and it hurt my face a lot, the eye movements, my nervous
You
system.
don't need to do it. You don't need to do it with eye movements. You can
Oh,
do it with
really?
tapping. You can do it with sound. There are a number of different ways.
Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. And is there anything you might say more about, you know, spiritual awakening when we have very little support, and how, you know, the distractions, like watching Hulu, you know, at night, it just feels
Don't watch scary or violent movies or TV, please. It won't help you. There's
just
there's a lot of violent stuff
yeah,
there on Hulu and Netflix and stuff. You know, so
right,
keep it really, you know, sweet, bland, simple. You know, don't,
right.
because that stirs up your trauma.
Just distractions in general, and it feels like before there wasn't such a pull into the world, and I'm feeling a pull back into the world and getting a little involved, and it feels like I'm getting busier, and it's
And again, there's nothing wrong with busyness or being in the world. We are in the world, after all. We can't separate ourselves from the world. But yeah, I know not having support is it can be difficult. And I know you're up there in Sonoma County, and there's a lot of stuff going on, really difficult situations happening
yeah,
in California. So yeah, but getting some support would be good. Reaching out to other people, friends, you know. I don't know what's available to you.
yeah. There's not a lot.
It's not crucial. We can wake up in any situation, but these are things that help. You know, community is, sangha is really helpful, really important.
Right, right. I've looked, and I'll keep looking, and
Yeah, yeah.
it just feels like a teacher, a guide is really important for me, and I haven't found, and I know the power. I've experienced the power of having an awakened teacher, and it's just it's what a precious gift. And
But just remember that is in you, or is you as well. Right? You know, don't ever forget that. You know, that awakened awareness is your awakened awareness. You know, it's what's looking out through your eyes, even in the midst of. Whoops, you're getting a lot of background. I think someone is not muted. No? Okay. You know, that is your very own, that is your very own natural state and condition as well. You know, it's what's looking out through your eyes always, even in the midst. Remember those feelings. Whoa, it's like we're getting a radio coming through here.
I would just, Teresa, maybe you can mute while Stephen's talking. Perfect, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, okay, that sounds good. You know, that is your awareness too. It's what's experiencing life, and even in the midst of strong feeling, nothing has gone away. Nothing is missing. You know, the feeling may be very strong, but what is aware of the feeling? You know, the contents of your experience are more difficult, perhaps, than the contents of other people's experience, but the awareness is the same. Okay, and it's never absent. It's always available. You know. So try to remember that as much as you can. Even, I think there's a tendency to tell yourself the story that my life is so horrible and it's just so difficult and it's so much worse than everyone else's and I'm all alone. all these are stories, right? I mean, there are certain realities there, but the stories are really upsetting and depressing, and you know, so just see if you can watch the storytelling, right, about your situation. It just makes the situation more difficult, right? Does that,
Yes, yes, I hear what you're saying. Thank you, thank you. And brings to mind, I'm curious about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It seems like I'm on the survival rung.
that's right. It's hard. That's why I said that, you know, or
And
earlier. Yeah, it's hard when you're on survival.
does that really matter?
It's hard to do the waking up. You don't want to be on survival, as you know, if you possibly help it. I mean, that's something to unpack. I would suggest that a teacher would be great, but also someone to talk to, Teresa. You need someone to talk to and share this with. And again, it could be a friend, or again, if there's like community mental health or something like that. Not saying there's anything wrong with your mental health, but you know, just a counselor to talk with on a regular basis. I think it'd be really helpful. Yeah?
I do. I have a counselor.
You do. Okay, you do. Great.
Yeah,
That's
it's
good.
just
That's important. Have someone we can share, you know, what's going on for us, and who can hold it with us. You know,
it is important. It is.
it is. Yeah.
It's just having this, knowing so much better, knowing some just such a greater way of life, and then contracting back down again is just, it's been.
Yeah, it can be painful, but don't judge yourself for it. Okay. You know, like I should be more expanded, and I'm not. What's wrong with me? How terrible? You know, all that stuff. Spiritual superego, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just have compassion for this one, huh? Yeah, yeah. It's been difficult for you. Yeah. Don't add the difficulty of self-judgment, huh? Yeah.
I really appreciate you, Stephen. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate you, Teresa. You know, you're so honest and willing to share deeply of your experience. So thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Mhm. Yeah, Keith. Is that Jason? Do you have your hand up as well? Is that what you're? I can't tell. No, you don't. Okay, that's good. Keith, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Teresa, I too am in Northern California. I'm in Petaluma. So I've sent you a private text, a chat text private. So you feel free to look at it. And one of my issues has been to look for people with whom to explore these issues that bring us together today. Stephen, one thing I was touched by what you said, among many things, was your statement, keep things in front of you.
Right.
I have found that if I don't see self, I'm seeing from self, and get lost for days, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I've been exploring from the standpoint of inquiry. I think it feels in a fruitful way. These dynamics. What are the dynamics in my life and in life where the activity of selfing so relentlessly results in the experience of an entity called the self? How does that keep happening? How do I keep yeah, it's a rhetorical question, of course. How does that keep happening? Like Larry David. Oh my God. So it's a trick of time, as far as I can tell. There's the question of time and the magic trick. I've put it in 3 stages for myself, and understanding that it's not really 3 stages. That's time talking, but I'll put it that way anyway. The first stage, by which the selfing activity becomes believed to be a self, with all the repercussions that come from believing it, not just allowing that role, but believing the role. The first is any, there are five gates of sensory perception: seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, feeling, right? So let's say seeing. Right now I see. Right now there's seeing. Just seeing. That's number one. Number two, there's an act. The mental structure kicks in very fast and adds I to that.
That's right.
I see.
It appropriates it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, appropriates. And it's a process by which what comes after claims to come before. Or should I add the phrase seems to? This
That's
whole
right.
this
What
whole
comes after has come before, and it sounds like you're aware of the neuropsychological research that shows, for example, that the thought to do a particular action comes after the action, after the impulse to do the action has occurred.
I have become familiar with that, and and I think that does inform my.
Let me just repeat that for people. So to recognize that if you are going to, let's say, decide to get up and go to the bathroom or something, you've already started to get up and go to the bathroom, and then the thought comes after. That's what the research shows. So who's living this life? Who's in charge? Where does action come from? Right? Great reminder, right? Yeah. So go ahead, Keith.
Yeah. So that's the second step, is the claiming of the seeing.
Yeah.
As
moving,
an I with I.
Moving is happening. I am moving.
I am moving. And then there's the third step, which is again, in the seeming realm. I've really become appreciative of, through the non-duality frame, of adding, whether I actually say the word seems to be, to remember that this is what seems to be in the dreaming of the dreaming. So that said, in the third step, after the action of seeing has been claimed as I see, then the mental structure claims to actually be not only the self that sees, and actually that self moves to that I moves to the front of the queue, and claims to be the self that has always been there in this body.
Yeah, great.
So it's that three-way thing. And so what I do as a practice, if you will, is just in those moments when I find, oh my God, I've become a self again. And the whole process of, there was seeing, there was hearing, someone said that. I claim to have heard it, and I claim to be the permanent, separate, independent self that always hears and has been hearing it from the beginning. So,
and who is this I? And that's the question.
And I'll just conclude by saying that the topic of today's satsang, be yourself, at this point, I find that it is far more fruitful, or far less fruitful, as duality, to look for non-duality, than it is for non-duality to look for duality. Namely, when I remember to say, who has this thought? Who has this thought? Who is thinking this? Who believes? Who is this I? And then I do the Ramana Nisargadatta. I pretty regularly fail to find that I. Mm-hmm. And so instead of looking for non-duality from this non-existent self, the non-duality actually is always there, and it sees the non-existent self. Once again, I see what I'm not. So if I would put it as a mantra or a practice, use what I am to see what I'm not, as opposed to trying to use what I'm not to find what I am, which is the whole endless seeking what I always already am.
The question that then comes up is, who is using?
Well, for me, when I say who is using, great, it's actually, that's a problematic phrase. Allow the seeing that is always there, that I don't do anyway.
Allow.
So just allow, let's sit in the natural, sit as awareness, relax as awareness, sit in the natural state. I find increasingly just that reminder, which is paradoxically a command to do something. Sit as nothing, sit as everything, sit as awareness, but just allowing it at the level beyond the suggestion to do it. From that place, the seeing sees what I'm not, looking for what I am. That feeling of seeing what I'm not, the seeker, looking for what I am, is
Yeah.
so freeing.
Yeah, it opens you to awareness.
Which always is. Which always
Global.
is.
Yeah, which always is. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why, John Klein or Nisargadatta says, to discover who you are, first be aware of what you are not. As you become more and more aware of what you are not, it throws you back into what you are, because that which is aware of what you are not is what you are, essentially. Yeah. Very good. Great. Thank you, Keith. Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, exactly. The I, the mind, appropriates experience, appropriates and then claims it for itself. This is my experience. If you look closely, you'll see that the me is actually more like an activity. It's meing. There's something in us that me's every experience. I liken it to a male cat that pees on every tree to claim its territory. Oh, this thought, this thought, this thought. That's me, 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 me. So it's a reflex. It's a mechanism that goes on. And once it's seen, then we can naturally just come back to our natural state of awareness, which is always aware. It doesn't have to be manipulated or changed or expanded or contracted. See, awareness is aware. That's what awareness does. Yes, Julia. Hi, Julia. I haven't met
Hi.
you. Hi
No,
there.
we haven't met before. I'm happy to be here, and I guess my question has partly been answered, because for me it's this balance between the inquiry and the trauma work. I also have this, how you say, tendency to cling to the not feeling safe and the inner critic of something should be different in me,
Hi.
most of all,
Sure.
and in the world. But
Yes. Yes.
and I'm doing both. But sometimes I have been feeling, to do the inquiry too much can, how you say, loop something, or
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So use your discretion, what feels right to you. If it feels like it's not fruitful, you're kind of looping, then just let it go. Come back to sitting, just being open. Uh, you know, yeah. The inquiry can get very dry. It can get very intellectual. The main thing with inquiry is to let it be whole being, whole body. You're really interested in finding out who this I is, who is experiencing this moment, who is experiencing this sensation, what is experiencing. Can I find it? Literally, can I find it? It's not an abstract question. It's very practical in a way.
yes. And also in the meditation in the beginning, it became very much alive. This allowing everything that is, and because I see this is the tendency to not allow certain
That's right.
aspect of what is, and
That's right.
my prayer is to include these parts, or being, how you say, capable of not suppressing them, or not wanting to run away or
Yeah,
hide.
absolutely. Yeah, great. Yeah. And if there's been trauma, we've had to disconnect from our experience in some ways. We've had to, push away or avoid certain experiences. We've had to be fixated in that way. And the more, so it kind of goes both ways. The more that we can let go of the trauma, the more open we are to awakening. And the more we wake up and recognize who we are, it eases the trauma, right?
Yes.
Because it releases the fixation, and it gives us a sense of a deeper dimension of being that's never disturbed, even by the trauma. and that we can always come back to, you know, a deep resource for healing, knowing who we are, you know. So they work hand in hand. Psychological healing and waking up are, you know, mutually beneficial. Yeah.
Because I tend to find this peace or experience this peace more and more and more and more areas, and at the same time, it's like the, how you say, habitual patterns of fearful behavior or fearful ways of being in life is
Yeah,
still
it's
continuing.
very tenacious, shall we say. Yeah, it hangs on, you know.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so, but that's fine. Just keep being aware of it. Little by little, it starts loosening its hold, you know. Yeah. It's a long journey, you know. On the one hand, awakening can be sudden, all at once, you know, instantaneous, out of time. But the journey of living from that, embodying it, deepening, happens over time. Doesn't require effort necessarily, but it does require devotion and you know, an ongoing commitment to being awake and aware. You know?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I also like this keeping it in front of you.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
that's very helpful also.
yeah, yeah. It really is. It really is. Yeah. We are all, you know, that which we are is always behind it. It's always the
Yes.
space in which it arises. As soon as we're caught in it, you know, then we've lost that deeper knowing, that perspective of being. So yeah, great. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah,
Julia.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Someone else. And if you've already shared, feel free to share again if there's more you want to ask or speak about. Okay, let's just sit quietly, okay, which is what we're already doing anyway. Let's just sit quietly and come to rest in this present moment. Nothing you need to do right now, nothing you need to change or accomplish or experience other than what you're experiencing right now. Just rest and let everything be as it is. Okay, thank you everyone for joining satsang today. It's a precious opportunity to be together in this way, and I really appreciate your devotion to truth. So hopefully we'll meet again before too long. I'll be doing another online satsang through Open Circle Center in January on working with trauma on the path of awakening is the title. So we'll go more into the whole issue of trauma and how it relates to awakening, at least as far as I've discovered in my own exploration. And then in January, also the 4-month School for Awakening, which I've been offering now for 13, 14 years, which several of you have done. And it's a 4-month intensive program in spiritual awakening. So thank you, everyone. Take good care. Be well. Namaste.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you, everyone, for your presence.
Thank you, everyone.
There's just a request that just for the name of the poem again, Stephen, that you read, and the
Tilopa's song to Naropa. Tilopa, Tilopa, was a great spiritual adept in the Mahamudra tradition. He was actually Indian. And then Naropa, the guy who gave the name to Naropa University, was his student. It's a poem that Tilopa gave as a teaching poem to his student Naropa. Beautiful, powerful teaching, and some of it's kind of Buddhist in flavor, but a lot of it's just really quite understandable as it is. So I think it's a great piece of teaching. So.
Great, thank you. And just to say that as far as Open Circle is concerned, we have another teacher next Sunday, Adam Traxfield, and Falling Open. So another opportunity just to open to what is already open. Be here together in company. So stay tuned for that. You can find that at our website. And there will be a recording will be sent out of this event. So also, if you don't receive that within the week, you feel free to contact us, but it should be out. And just enjoy the rest of your days, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Kate.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.